replicate that just off of seeing it, right? Even though you're seeing it maybe from a photo or just one angle or however it might be, even if you see a decoy that you actually get to handle that you want to replicate, you know, if you dive in if that's your only narrative, just to copy something like that, you're gonna run into problems pretty quick, right? Because it's not that nuanced if you're trying to do something like realistic or heavily detailed. So, before I do like painting demos or carving demos, like all of this, my concepts are so like baked in that the carving and painting is like the frosting on the cake, you know? It's not like the real work part. For me, the work part and the stuff that I enjoy more is the actual research for the project, right? So say you're gonna do whatever subject, widget or what a widget drink or whatever. You know, I'll go through photos if I have them. If not, I'll try to take some of wild birds doing whatever they do. And if that doesn't work,
take your own photos.
Yeah, take your own photos. It's okay, like there's some advantages to doing your own photos. There's disadvantages too, you know. Well, there's photos are great reference, but if you take your own photos, you have more of like a concept, right? Or more of your narrative is developing better, rather than look at someone else's photos because they're shooting a shot at whatever angle, depicting whatever they're trying to communicate on whatever idea. So, you know, it's not really like you need high-tech equipment to do this either. Most of the photos I took on here, like this shot right here, this was at the zoo with a Gouette Z740. It only had an autofocus. It's not a complicated camera, but when I started doing this, I just had binoculars and I'd go out and watch wild birds, you know, and I was like, oh, I'm doing great research with this. But then when you finally get around to doing the project, you forgot a lot. But the funny thing is you don't really know that until you start taking photos, when you start realizing how much you forgot. So it's more just using photography as a recorder. They don't have to be great shots. It's more like keeping the context and the narrative going for the piece of art you're trying to do, right? And there's some, photography is a good starting point. Of course, there's other resources out there. If you can't find the bird you're looking for, you missed it, it's not the right time of year, you know, you can go to zoos too and find birds as well. Like the Minnesota Zoo, I wrote this 3 years ago, this is the 4th draft. The first one was like a thesis on this. So I dialed it back a little bit. And that's a great resource too. I haven't been to the Como Zoo in forever, and 3 years ago with the Minnesota Zoo. And they had blue-winged teal, pintail, redheads there, except they're in the indoor rainforest exhibit. So the lighting in there is terrible, and I literally closed the zoo down that day, trying to get dialed in to get like a right exposure, because all of them looked just dark. I probably took 300 shots, and I finally got dialed in. But once I did, you know, and if you're sitting there long enough, these birds really are tame, and they like people. So if you look on the back page, there's a mandarin bull that was standing on the rail right next to me. You know, I could have reached out and like touched it. You know, so, and same with those ringtail in the background. So it is a good resource once you put in your time and get good, great shots like that, right? You know, it was doing like its full courtship display, you know. So I got that's one of the shots I got, you know. Got a lot more. Same with these widgeon up top, and all of these except the red-breasted merganser and the goldeneye, those were all taken in city parks. Like right, like 5 minutes from here. You know, I'm not up north or anything like that. The goldeneye is a great one, just because it's like you hear time and again, like diving ducks, their legs are placed far back in their body. They can't stand up. You know, they have to stand up a certain way. But you can obviously see this one is standing fairly horizontal. So obviously it might be more.
With the Mallard tool.
Yeah, well, obviously they can do more than what you read. So by taking your own photos and doing your own observations, you start to see through what you've read or what someone told you is right or wrong. Therefore, you create more freedom for yourself and your ideas, right? Because you don't want to be tied down or limited too much. You know, you want to have fun still, or you want to, you know, create the piece that you want to do, right? Another thing that I've been doing since I lost the photos for this was museum specimens are good too. Like if there's a species, especially protected ones, you know, like raptors, shorebirds, songbirds, you know, there's a great collection at the University of Minnesota campus in the ecology building. That's where they keep all those specimens. So I'm not sure who's the curator now, but 3 years ago it was Mike Westberg. And I got in touch through him, through the director of ornithology to the Bell Museum. He forwarded me his email. I mean, I was looking for spectacle gliders, and he was like, oh yeah, we got a ton of them. And of course, when I get there, he pulls out a tray of king eiders, and he was like, these ones? And I was like, no, not those ones. He was like, oh, what were they again? So they did have them, and you know, it was a whole tray of 2 drakes, a couple of hens, and even like some downy subadults and little chicks too. But that's okay for a subject matter that you'll never see, right? In a zoo. Well, I'm sure I think San Diego Zoo has some, and maybe the Philadelphia, but most zoos don't have those things on hand. And it was just what I had to do, you know, unless I was going to take a vacation to do that, which would not be worth it.
Call Don and ask him where he sees them.
Yeah, I'd be like, hey, where do you get these things? Well, it's funny, I volunteered, and one of the specimens was taken in like 1897 on Point Barrows, Alaska. So it was ancient, you know, and I'm holding this thing and I'm like, should I even be handling this? But it's a good resource, you know, and it's worth it. Of course, they're study skins, right? So, and some of them are really old, case in point, right? So take it with a grain of salt, but as far as like color or feather shape and basic pattern, that's actually a pretty good way to go about it, do something like that. But, you know, as far as color, I wouldn't go to take some of that too literally. And same with these zoo birds, the colors seem a little off to me. They have like all these duck exhibits have like flamingos there, and I think they get into that shrimp brine, and they're all like darker or reddish.
They won't have a cage too?
Yeah, so they're feeding in that stuff. And then, of course, wildlife films or, you know, YouTube. You know, when I was doing research for a long-tailed duck I was working on a while ago, I just typed in long-tailed duck and you get all kinds of stuff. A lot of it's like, you know, it's kind of ridiculous, but it's the bird itself. You don't need to listen to the sound or anything like that, you know. Some of it's like hunting, some of it's, you know, just observations, you know. Diving or whatever, someone else's footage that they took at a zoo. The important thing, and some wildlife films are pretty good, and some are not so much. It seems like the edits are kind of weird, so you kind of lose some context there. So, and I think it's because they're constantly moving, right? So they go out of focus, so there's your cut, right? And then they just pick up again. You know, I'm guessing that's what they do while they're filming it. I've never filmed it. Live birds like that before, but I'm thinking those cuts are because of that. But you kind of lose some of that context on that. But the information that they're talking about is completely secondary to me. I'll just turn the sound off and be like, all right, if I'm doing a pintail or a canvasback, I'll just be like, I'm going to check the scapular feathers and just watch it through. Or I'm going to see how the side pocket goes. Or I'm going to see how the neck rolls, you know. And then you start to figure out how that's moving in 3 dimensions, right? As it turns around. It's kind of hard to tell with birds because they're just all feathers, right? So you're trying to create an illusion, right, of what that bird would be like in 3 dimensions. So again, you know, it's just about getting outside and trying to put it together. You know, I spend a lot of time, you know, in the spring just trying to get good shots. You know, I've definitely upgraded my camera, so it's a little bit more than what I was doing back then, but it's basically because, you know, I was using a point and shoot camera, which is great, especially for like mallard footage or wood duck footage or shots, because you can find those at any park, right? And you can get pretty close to them. And the city, and even the spring, you know, with the migration coming through, on city lakes, they get pretty tame if there's people walking around all the time. So I get some great shots this spring of some shovelers, these blue and teal. I mean, they're right here, they're used to people being around, so they weren't skittish or anything. So you're getting really great natural behaviors, you know, which lends itself well, you know, because you just, sometimes you just riffing shots while you got it, because it gets spooked at any time, you know. So it's a lot of work, but the important thing to that work is the fact that I no longer get stumped out on a project. You know, I'm never like, oh no, what did I do wrong? Or I'm losing interest in this because it's taking too long. It's more of like a straight through rather than a, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. You know, which is, I was there, you know, I've been there, done that, you know, and it's like you gotta evolve past that, you know. It's not necessarily, and it's not just for well-detailed carvings or, you know, whatever you want to call them, decorative type decoys. Take the same considerations for any gunning decoy, and a good reference for those would be almost a field guide. You know, you've been out hunting or you've been scouting for birds, and you get like a distant shot, or you have like binoculars out or something, and you kind of get like what they look like at a distance, and then you can cross-reference that with field guides and just kind of be like, all right, they project like this, and then you emphasize those aspects, you know? Because there's certain features, I think, on birds that are really great. Like, they're there for a reason. Like, those patterns represent some sort of identifier, right? So you really want to incorporate that kind of stuff in your gunning decoys, right? Like, for example, that bright white triangle on like a ringneck duck, you know, you really should emphasize that, because they, you know, it works, or the white circle on a golden eye. They're using those sort of identifiers, you know, to recognize each other. So it's just and you know, taxidermy, other taxidermy is great too. I'm pretty critical on taxidermists, and there's a few good ones, and there's not, and there's some that aren't that really great. So you just gotta kind of use your judgment, you know. But either way, if you can't find it, if it's what you've got to work with it, you know, or figure out how you can make it work. And if it's not really like what you're looking for, maybe you just gotta dial back the complexity of the piece, right? And if you start taking those considerations, developing in your mind's eye what you think the project should look like when it's finished, you will definitely, you know, start feeling better about the work you're doing. You know, it'll be more rewarding. You know, I wish I could work more than I get to nowadays, but when I do sit down and have time to do it, I'm just cranking away. It's just like a full work process. It's not like oh man, I'm getting burnt out, I gotta take a break. You know, it's really enjoyable and relaxing now. Where it wasn't always, like, it was always fun, but it was, you know, you're always second guessing yourself or wondering if something's right or wrong, you know. Even though I don't think in those terms anymore, because I'm just like, hey, it is what it is, right? It's just a work of art or a carving or a painting or whatever you want to say, whatever it is, you know. But I feel like it's important, you know, with any other sort of painting. It's just, that's the illusion that I was trying to create based on research that I did, you know. And sometimes it's based on other carvings, sometimes it's based on actual birds, observations, and sometimes it's a mount, sometimes it's some footage on a video or TV or something, you know. Like you get like that pose where you're like, oh yeah, that's it. And you'll notice this too, when you start like photographing birds, especially ducks and geese, or swans even for that matter, they take a lot of awkward poses, you know, because you get these weird like in-between shots of them doing something. You'll figure out pretty quickly that a lot of it would just make a terrible carving, you know, just awkward, you know, neck stretches or whatever, you know, and again, it's just about doing a little homework to make the carving process go smoother, you know, and it's not necessarily for accuracy, it's just more what you got to do to whatever your process is to make you feel better about what you're doing, instead of just seeing something and being like, all right, I'm gonna do that, and then sitting down at it and spending a lot of time on it to the point where it's no longer fun or you've lost interest, you know. And you know, you'll just end up having some bonfires at that point. And finished to decoys, you know, which can get expensive since we're talking about trying to carve on the cheap. You know, this is definitely not really gearing towards this, but you don't need a big budget to do this kind of research. Like, it's free to go to check out this reference material. The Minnesota Zoo is expensive, but you don't necessarily have to go out there, and with the internet, you know, you can Google image any bird you want, you're gonna get 1 million hits on it, you know, you just go through that, pick an image you like, but it's also important to see that bird for yourself, to know how it moves, how it behaves, and some characteristics of it, right? Because that's what you're trying to convey to make it look real, you know, I think anyways. And it doesn't have to be really realistic, it can just be like the basic shape with the, you know, or an interesting shape with like a pretty basic paint job, you know, as long as it looks the way, you know, as long as it's your mind's eye, right? Because you're trying to create what you see in your head, right? Because you're starting out with a pattern.
It's in your head.
Yep, or you're starting out with a photo, or you're starting out with a model. You're making a two-dimensional pattern, and now you're going to create a three-dimensional pattern, or a three-dimensional object, right? So you need to really cover a lot of bases, and that's just a basic starting point, you know? Then you get into the whole painting, where you're going to do acrylics, oils, wash, you know, there's a bunch of different enamels, house paint, you know, whatever you're going to do, but it's nice to have like a really good, solid concept before you start. You know, like you got to see that in your head, you know, and think about how you're going to go about doing that, you know, like, all right, I like this, but is it practical or not? Or can it be done? And I like that question. So it's mostly in the question, you know, like, how is that going to work? How is this going to work? What happens if you do this or that? You know, there's a lot of good resources out there. I'm kind of doing my shtick on it, but I think if you want to get a little bit more insight, it's definitely better worded than what I'm doing. If you read Larry Barth's new book that just came out, he goes like, there's no techniques in that book. It's just all where his ideas came from, you know, and how long he thought about a certain idea before it actually became a carving, and like how he kind of troubleshot some of the technicalities of it, which is really interesting, you know, because a lot of, you know, the technique, the carving, the painting, that's the illusion. It's the real project that exists in your mind, you know, like the real deal, and it's like creating that is the important part. But you want it to be like what you see in your head, right? Does it make sense? Any questions?
Yep.
I have one.
Yeah.
You do photographing of the birds yourself. Now you're using a still camera?
So, yeah, these are all still shots. Right.
Would it make sense, I'm trying to wrap my brain around this, would it make sense to use a digital camera? Because now I'm taking
wait.
hundreds of different...
No. Yeah, I'm sorry. These are digital. These are all digital photography. I don't shoot anything out.
But it's, each one is done individually, it's not done with digital video cameras, right? You know?
No, yeah, so all of these shots were either taken with, I've got a Canon T3 with a 400mm lens, which is what these were. This one was just on a Kodak Z740, which is a really basic point and shoot 5 megapixel camera, right? But it's not really the equipment, it's just, like all photography, it's just being in the right spot at the right time, or going out of your way to get the shot that you're trying to do. Like I just was like super surprised when I went to the zoo to see that they even had North American ducks there. And I was like, oh, this is incredible. But then the problem was, you know, it took me forever to get dialed in on it because it was so dark, you know, and I was used to shooting outside, which was really easy for me. And that was and so with the digital SLR, it's a little bit more user-friendly if you have access to one, but it's not important. You're just trying to like get some sort of reference point and some sort of context to help you with your idea. And if you're like, oh, that's a great shot, but it's blurry, there's some detail missing that I want to get, then you'll start looking to mounts, or maybe you'll start looking to videos. You know, you're trying to put some pieces together to fill in some blanks, you know.
I guess that's the question I was asking is, would it, instead of having a camera that just takes one shot, I'm better off filming that? I've watched some videos
no, you're right.
where it seems like now, especially using the pause feature on the VCR.
That's
I'm
not.
dating myself there. DVD player, that now all of a sudden I have hundreds of photos, and I
Yep.
can actually watch how that duck moves its head.
Yeah, you're right about that, and that's good too. But I sometimes if the action's really good, I will set like a burst mode on my camera and just shoot continuously. The reason I don't really film live or video is because with my luck, the part I want to pause on would be the part that's out of focus, right? And when I do bursts, you know, you lose focus sometimes, right? And I think that's why when you watch a lot of wildlife films, there'll be like some great activity and then there'll be some random cut, and then they'll pick up or they'll go to another scene or something like that. And I think that's because they lose focus and they're like, oh, this is a great place for a cut, as they're like filming, you know.
And the camera may not have got an autofocus that was trying to do it. The bird's moving quickly, it may
Yeah.
not be able to catch up.
Exactly, and with like a point and shoot, like I was using initially, that's exactly the problem you run into, where you'll get a blurry shot, but you'll still get it's just like the reference point, or you'll get it's not a bad shot, but it's not like a National Geographic shot, right? Where you'll still get like the basic shape and some coloring, and sometimes they're actually kind of abstract looking poses and stuff like that, but you know, you're kind of limited if you can't manually focus. But even when you're manually focusing, it still blurs out on you at a certain point if you're trying to film. I should try the filming feature more. I just haven't done it because I'm really not a great photographer in general. Like, this is not my photography portfolio by any means. But like this sequence of buffleheads here, actually, this was like a big sequence of them coming from across the lake, banking, flying over a group of them, and then landing a little bit further away. So, you know, that actually worked out, but I was close to them, you know, so it depends on how close you are. You can't always get close to these things, because you usually have water or something like that, but it's just trial and error. A lot of error and a lot of trial. But that's the nice part about photography this day and age, right? Because you can do a digital format and just delete it and start over again and get yourself dialed in and just keep trying and trying and trying, you know, until you figure it out. And they're pretty user-friendly by now. You know, it's not like a huge mystery or a challenge in any capacity. It just takes some time to do it and finding the subject matter you want to photograph. So that's a challenge, you know. But it's not uncommon for me to go out on any given like spring day. Like I'll be out there till the lights or the weather get me out of there. You know, it gets too dark to shoot, or it starts snowing or something dumb like that, or raining. Because it's like I'm not only shooting ducks, I'm always shooting. So if there's like a robin or something, I'm trying to figure this camera out and get like the shot I want when I, you know, get a good subject matter. So I'll be shooting at that until something happens, you know. You just gotta shoot. That's the great thing about this digital format, is just shoot, shoot, and shoot. You know. And it's fun, it's relaxing to me. You know, I used to do a lot of duck hunting, and I've like dialed it back quite a bit because I get the same kind of excitement from photography, you know. So I just, give me a day in like February when it's snowing. First day it's been 16 degrees in a month, and I'll sit out there and shoot common mergansers flying down the Minnesota River until it gets dark out, So it's just whatever, and this is a part, like I said, this is my favorite part of any sort of carving, is just watching, like developing the idea, because before I start, the idea is so visualized that, it's like some carvers like to have like collages of the duck they're gonna do in different poses. I don't do any of that, it's just all in my head 100%, And sometimes I'll go check some photos that I took, or sometimes I'll check, Google photos, at a certain point just to make sure, but usually it's just for fun, like, oh, did I miss anything or not? But usually it's like, oh, it's all there, There's some weird aspects to every bird that you're like, it's easy to overlook, especially if you never get them in your hands or anything like that. It'd be nice if there was like a legit aviary or something around here that had actually North American birds, and it was outdoors somewhere, there's some well or waterfowl trust down south where they have all kinds of ducks from all over the world, where you can spend a lot of time down there.
You don't have your own pond yet, do you?
Yeah, but if you could do something like that, that'd be the best, because you would just know those things inside and out, which would be fun, but then of course you have a pet that you have to take care of too, and birds are messy, especially aquatic birds where you'd be changing the water all the time. So I do like this aspect because you're getting just wild behavior, not just a tame duck, Even though if you're just photographing mallards or with ducks in a park, you can really butter them up with some cracked corn and some bread or something like that, it'll really start to put on a show for you. But it's all about just getting out there though, and just figuring it out for yourself, It's just the idea, just getting that idea, whatever it takes. And like I said, for me sometimes it's a species that I've seen, or maybe like I'm gonna do a shoveler one of these days, just because it's spring. There's hundreds of them on Lake Harriet this spring. I specifically went out there for red-breasted mergansers, but I ended up shooting shovelers because there's hundreds of them, and they're used to people, so it was like shooting mallards, from here to that table, and they weren't even scared, They weren't acting normally. Like if you saw those anywhere else, they'd be all nervous and agitated, or they'd be out pretty far away, So it's like you just get what you get, but you gotta go out to find it, The fall is a little bit tougher because all birds look pretty good in the spring, so you'll get a lot of variations, and if you do group, you'll get to see how some are different than the others too, so you can pull from one or pull from the other, and you'll start to figure out. And if you get some really great shots, like again, this first page of this blue wingtail, this area, but this is why zoos are from here, because you would never get that shot in the wild unless that bird was about to die or something, because you never get the drop on that thing. You'd be all pretty nervous. About as close as I get to them are, what's on the last page there, in the wild anyways, without getting them too agitated. You can get close to them enough within reason, but they get a little spooked up eventually. But, it's all about having fun and doing the research, and having fun with the research, and then turning that to the project. It's not about accuracy, it's about developing what you want to communicate.
My hair reminds me of that merganser in the bottom there.
Yeah, so I took that shot with the basic point and shoot camera, and the reason how I got that shot is I was watching that merganser dive, and he was chasing fish into shallow water, and I guessed about where he'd pop up and jumped up on a rock right as he popped up and saved the shot. So he just popped up out of the water right there, And that was with no land. That was just with the basic lens and an autofocus, up in 2 harbors. I did get the shot of him when he first came in. All of them were blurry, but he landed way out in the middle of the harbor and then eventually worked his way into shore. But I got a great series of shots out of that because he didn't really fly off or spook. So I got them all swimming away, so I got like a nice cross section of the back. I think he eventually puffed out his head a lot more, so I got a good shot of that too. The lighting was kind of bad because it was very overcast, but you know, it still worked. Yeah, so those are great birds for me to photograph. I actually enjoy chasing those things around. Just because I haven't done one yet, or I'm working on one now, but there's a lot of room for artistic interpretation in a sense.
North Shore?
What's that?
Was that on the North Shore?
Yeah, 2 harbors up on Lake Superior. So, and the Golden Eye was in central Minnesota, but all the other ones were just right in the cities here. So it's not hard to find them, you know. And I thought that was incredible when I first started going out with binoculars was, oh my gosh, I can't believe these are widgeon? What the heck? Canvas bags? Redheads? Like I thought you had to be out in the country to find those things.
Canvas bags in town here?
They were on Lake Calhoun, like this spring, and just a raft of bluebills and redheads too. So they're around. You just gotta find them, you know. And it's crazy. They're all in the cities too, and they're all pretty tame because people run around those lakes all day. You know, so you can just get up there. I have like a folding stool, and I just sit down there, get my monopod set up, and like you just sit there, and they'll just come up, get really comfortable with you, so you're not really doing anything. And they're used to people walking by the whole time. You know, the thing that spooked them the most when I was out there this spring was, I thought it was a dog, but it was actually an eagle. Like dive bombed on like a bunch of coots and shovelers, you know, and scared them all. But I was looking around, I was like, is that me? And then I was looking around for a dog, and then of course I got my hand off the lens, and this eagle flies like 10 feet in front of me. You know? And I was like, oh great! So I got a blurry shot of it quartering away, you know, which is not the shot you're trying to get. You know? But so you always see all kinds of dumb stuff like that. You know, there's always like foxes, coyotes, all that other stuff out there too. These 2 blue and teal are flying in the shot because the otter scared them. You know, that shot was taken in the cities here. You know? So going out there and just doing that, you'll see a lot of nature, and you know, you'll start to get good ideas and good concepts for your next project. And as long as you get like a good narrative going, you'll coast right through it. You know, because you're like, all right, I'm gonna do a buffle head, low head, you know, with the tail slightly up underwater. And you just go out there, look for that shot, watch how and if you watch it and shoot it, you'll see how they bring their head up and then they tuck their head down, and you'll start to see how those movements work, you know. And you can do variations of that and create like a lot of like movement in a pretty, like a decoy is not. It's a pretty stationary object, you know, but it's good. Is it like 9:15 right now?
Yeah.
But yeah, a little research like that goes a long ways. It's at the end of the day. I'm sure a lot of you know that like Tom doesn't work like that. Probably. What do you do? Like, are you doing mostly off of like taxidermy mounts or?
No, photos. I have a bunch of study skins, so I use those more for feather shapes and color.
Yeah.
But photos, a lot of images on the internet.
Yeah. But either way, you're pretty before you even start.
Yeah.
You know, as you're working through your pattern, or before you even start a pattern, you have a pretty good mental image of what that's going to look like finished, right?
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to get you guys, how I'm trying to get you guys thinking on this. Because all that painting, all that carving, that's pretty much secondary. It's only as good as the idea. You know. That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Good job.